In Japanese folklore, Jikininki are ghouls which feast on the bodies of the dead. They are the spirits of greedy, selfish, or impious individuals who are cursed after death to seek out and eat human corpses, similar to the ghouls of the Western world. They do this at night, scavenging for newly dead bodies and food offerings left for the dead. They sometimes also loot the corpses they eat for valuables, which they use to bribe local officials to leave them in peace. They appear as ordinary humans for the most part, save for a few monstrous features, such as sharp, pointed teeth, which they use to peel the flesh off the recently deceased. Sometimes, Jikininki are said to look like decomposing corpses with inhuman features such as sharp claws or glowing eyes. They are covered in all sorts of sores like blisters, abrasions, scars, and infections. The only hair they have is random tufts. They are a horrifying sight, and any mortal who views one finds themselves frozen in fear. However, several stories give them the ability to magically disguise themselves as normal human beings and even describe how they lead normal lives by day, revealing their horrific true selves only at night when they are hungry. Jikininki are found near villages, usually in abandoned temples or old ruins. They avoid excessive contact with humans, but remain close to human settlements, as humans are their main source of food. Jikininki gain their sustenance by devouring the flesh and bones of the recently deceased. They do not enjoy their existence and do not find pleasure in eating the dead. It merely temporarily relieves some of the pain of their eternal hunger. They are often depicted as actually being upset by their condition and wanting peace, though hiding their existence as much as possible, since they would get chased down for the terrible things they have done. In these tales, Jikininki lament their condition and hate their repugnant cravings for dead human flesh. Jikininki exist somewhere between the living and the dead. They exhibit some ghost-like traits. They and their dwellings are often invisible during the day, appearing only to unsuspecting travelers during the night. They usually hunt their prey at night as well, slipping into temples when the dead are lain there for funerary prayers. Jikininki are closely related to Gaki, hungry ghosts of Buddhist cosmology, who are constantly starving but unable to eat anything. A Jikininki is born when a person performs evil deeds, corrupting their soul. Some Jikininki were corrupt priests who could not properly pass on after their deaths. Others were once humans who, for some reason or another, developed a taste for human flesh. As time went on and they continued eating people, they gradually transformed into these monsters. There are many legends about Jikininki in Japan. The earliest recorded tells how in early Japan there was a man who worked for a wealthy business that made expensive gifts. He lived in a poor home and was constantly thirsty for riches, higher status, and anything valuable. As a child, he had always stolen possessions from his friends that were nicer than his own. At his factory, he worked alone in the room where products were stored. Sometimes his greed would be so heavy that he would smuggle one of the gifts out of the room when he went home. The gifts were small, beautiful gold trinkets that could be desired by anyone. The man found them so irresistible that he would just take them without thinking. One day, he was caught trying to smuggle out a golden candle holder. The owner of the company took back all of the stolen items, and the man was sentenced to death. He was hanged and died slowly and painfully as punishment for what he had done. Once he was officially dead, he was reborn. However, he was not reborn as a human. He had lived a terrible life of greed and wanting, and so was cursed to become a Jikininki. He had heard about the myths of Jikininki before, only now realizing they were all true. As with most people who do bad things, he had never expected such awful consequences to happen to him. In the deepest part of the night, he would unwillingly float around the village looking for dead human flesh to feed on. In the day, he would take the shape of an old man and live hidden in the mountains. He was constantly hungry, but could only feed on the dead human corpses and offerings at their gravesides in the deepest part of the night. He was cursed to live eternally as a Jikininki, feeding on the dead and sobbing his bitterness so loudly that nearby villagers could hear his terrible howls while tucked up in their beds at night. The most famous legend of Jikininki tells how long ago a monk named Muso Soseki was traveling on a pilgrimage when he became lost deep in the mountains. As day began to fade, he came across a dilapidated old hermitage where an elderly monk gave him directions to a village not far away. Soseki traveled on, and just as night fell, he arrived in the village. The son of the village chief welcomed Soseki and invited him to stay at his house as a guest. However, he said, "My father passed away earlier today. In our village, we have a custom. When one of us dies, we all must spend the night away from the village. If we do not do this, we will be cursed. But you are tired from your journey, and seeing as you are a priest, and also not a member of this village, I see no reason why you too must leave. Please, feel free to stay in my house this night while the rest of us leave the village." Soseki gratefully accepted. The villagers all left the village, and Soseki was alone. That night, the monk recited funerary prayers over the body of the village chief. All of a sudden, he felt a presence nearby. Soseki felt his body freeze up, and he was unable to move. Then, a dark, hazy shape crept through the house and up to the body. The creature devoured the remains of the village chief, and then slipped away as quietly as it had arrived. The following morning, when the villagers returned, Soseki told them what he had seen during the night. The village chief's son told him that this was just as the local legends say. Soseki was surprised and asked why the monk living in the hermitage did not perform the funeral prayers for the village. The village chief's son seemed confused. "There is no hermitage nearby," he said. "What's more, there had not been any monks in this region for many generations." Soseki traced his steps through the mountains to the old hermitage he had seen the night before. The old monk welcomed him into the hovel and told him, "I apologize for showing you such a sight last night. The monster you saw in the village chief's house was me. Long, long ago, I was a priest. I lived in that village, and I performed many funeral services for the dead. However, all I could think of was the payment for my services, and not the souls of the deceased. Because of my lack of conviction, when I died, I was reborn as a Jikininki. Now, I am forced to feed off the bodies of the dead. Please, save my soul and release me from my torment." In that instant, the elderly monk and the dilapidated old hermitage both disappeared. Soseki was sitting on the dirt, surrounded by tall grass. The only feature nearby was an ancient, moss-covered gravestone. Jikininki were introduced to the West in the book Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things by Lafcadio Hearn in 1904. Though based on several folk tales and legends, this book was written simply to scare people, not educate them of the 26th class in Japanese Buddhism from which they originated. The book depicted Jikininki as just decomposing cadavers, like zombies, which is still how they are often depicted today, without the other terrible parts of their appearance and nature found in the original stories. Those original stories teach those who hear them that greedy people become Jikininki to scare people who are greedy and cause them to change their ways for the better. After all, wouldn't you rethink your ways if you knew you not doing so would cause you to become a slavering, monstrous, half-corpse who feasts on the flesh of the newly dead to try to sate your eternal hunger? I know I would.